Oh. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Catherine O'Hare Rogers, and I'm the Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer for the state of Michigan. Most of you already know that and have met me in the past. I wanted to start off today by introducing the Operator of the Month. The Operator of the Month this month is Gracious Homes. Unfortunately, she can't be with us today, but we're going to give her a few minutes next month to talk about her program for a few minutes. But she has a 7-bed female home in Battle Creek, and she's been a certified operator for, I believe, 3 going on 4 years now. So, and runs a good program. So, all right, we got Jeff on here. Jeff?
Hey guys, I have really nothing for today other than to say that I'm here and available. So anything that anybody wants to come up, please ask. And hey, Chris, how you doing, kid? And that's pretty much all I have for today. Thanks.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, kid.
Only one that calls me kid anymore.
He calls me kid too, and I'm 61. So, yeah. So I wanted to introduce Jeff or Chris Edrington. He was on the meeting in December, and I couldn't attend. I was sick at the time, but there was so much positive feedback from the operators. We wanted to invite him back again and give the operators an opportunity to ask him questions and pick his mind of his years of wisdom to see if you can benefit from him talking today. So go ahead, Chris.
So what's going on currently in Minnesota is, I don't know if some of you guys are aware, we had a big landscape shift with all these outpatients paying for beds, and then the state decided that that was kickback money, so they kicked them all out, and a bunch of people got displaced, and they're calling everywhere. I get calls every day with people now still trying to find a free bed, trying to find a bed paid for by some sort of funding model, and we've never had that in Minnesota. So they're trying to create that, but they're saying it might be a year, next year maybe. What really damaged the landscape was that the gatekeeper for a sober house became the people writing the checks, not the state affiliate. And that's what really jerked us around and really goofed us up, because it created a whole bunch of crappy sober houses. And so when they called it kickback and kicked those guys all out from charge, for being able to pay for beds, we did lose the crappy operators, or a lot of them, which is an upside, but we also lost about 800 people lost their beds. So we all these people roaming around trying to figure something out. And some operators were able to shift a model to something called board and lodge and get funding for it, but they had to do other things like food and 24-hour staff, stuff they weren't used to doing. So there's a few of those out there, but not very many, and they're never empty beds now. So we actually have a MASH Minnesota Association meeting of all the operators at later today. So I guess what's current and for me, and what my model is that I was always private pay. I never took any funding, and I didn't take those paid IOP beds until just after COVID, and I let a few of them in because we had some empty beds. But the moral of the story is that when you set something or somebody else up as the gatekeeper to the sober livings, as opposed to the state affiliate with the NAR standards behind them, you're asking for trouble, because the operators basically told MASH, to piss off. They don't need us because they get checks from the other place, and they didn't care about MASH anymore. I think my iPad is still on. I'm going to turn it off. The landscape got really sort of messed with. Yeah, I don't know why this is.
Did you get to figure out, Chris?
So I don't know what exactly we talked about last time, Jeff, but I think that all of the stuff that's going on in Minnesota has pushed MASH into a corner, and we look what responsible for a lot of it, which we didn't have a hand in as the affiliate. The state, all that fraud stuff you hear about Minnesota, there was this giant one about feeding the children during COVID that was the really big money. And then there were these smaller ones in the chemical dependency world of the outpatients and three entities that were overbilling, and that was got thrown into the mix. And all three of those entities needed the sober houses or the recovery residences to make their models work. So we got thrown in with it too. And so I've literally had parents from, treatment centers looking to place their kid calling me and asking me, are you guys part of the fraud? And I'm like, none of us were part of the fraud, because you had to have permission to bill Medicaid if you were able to overbill them. And we never had that. So, it's really messed it up. It's inspired some treatment centers around the state to create their own recovery residences, which are not the same as typical sort of ones that we're used to. They're just another level of care in their continuum that doesn't have a bunch of clinicians connected to it, and you don't really leave their campus. That's not really sober living. It's messy, but it's getting slowly recognized and somewhat cleaned up. The operators that are left have called me and other operators to try to figure out how to switch to a private pay model. And the first thing I tell them is, you have to not be a crappy operator if you want to be a private pay model. And you were a crappy operator because you didn't have to be a good operator, because you had people coming in and paying regardless of how well you ran your house. And that's how they learned it. And so they're either unlearning that or they're closing. What it translates to me for, and I've talked to Dave and some of the other people on the MARR board about this, is if any state affiliate is going to go certify a house, you have essentially a list of things that they have to do that are sort of box checker things and innocuous things. Like, they're not unimportant, but they're not to do with the personality of the house. They're like the functionality of the house, like the fire code and all that kind of stuff, and how many refrigerators you have, and having the right documentation, which is a big one now. And what I always struggled with at MASH was, well, how do we check to see if they're running their house well, or if they treat their people well, or if they have an attitude, or are they taking people's advantage of people on the money? And they were doing all of that, and we couldn't tell. And so I've been trying to push for that sort of criteria with Katie on the Minnesota Association, because Katie not only works for MARR, Katie used to work for me for 8 years, and then I jumped onto the MARR board, and she had to do that stuff, and then the MASH board, and she did that stuff in 2008, and then when I got on the MARR board, and so Katie and I became sort of the de facto staff of both organizations for a long time, and now she's back doing both again. So we talk a lot about, how can we make it better, but we really aren't going to be able to do the big stuff we want to do until the state affiliate gets funded. But for purposes of a conversation, I think what's important from your guys' perspective, and I don't know how many of you are affiliated with or part of the working with MARR, or you're just operators that are certified by MARR, but we're about to do a bunch of certifications in Minnesota again, and I'm going to be on that committee and doing actual inspections, because I sold a bunch of my houses and I have more time. And I'm very curious about how we're going to go in as the state affiliate and say to so-and-so operator, great, you check all these boxes with fire code and refrigerators and documentation, but how do we know that your house is comfortable and people are treated right and it feels good to be there, and that the residents feel they have a voice? Because I will tell you that I answered the complaint line for Minnesota, for MASH, for 6 or 7 years. And I had, not that all the operators are terrible, some of them are great, but I had a few of them where I could tell by the way that the person who was writing a complaint that lost their deposit or got kicked out or for whatever reason were writing a complaint. And then we had a process, and I would call the operator and I would call the individual and I would get both stories. And then I would try to get them to reach some common ground. I would try to say, well, your behavior led to you getting evicted or kicked out, or the operator was like, why did you kick that person out? It seems like you did it just because you didn't like them very much. And all of the above happened. And so I would try to get them to come to some realization or some even ground and say to the operator, here's some things you might not know that you could do in your houses so that you don't arrive at this place again. And then to the resident, I could say, can you see your part in this? This is how you got there, how you got to be asked to leave. And a lot of times that worked. And sometimes I could get the operator to give the money back, because we had and still have a big issue here where operators will take 1 month's rent or some arbitrary number for a deposit, which acts and sounds like a damage deposit in a typical lease, but in reality, it's a sober deposit. And for 20 years here, that if you drank, you lost that money, and that's what it meant. It came from an archaic model of this, if you talk to some of the people that have been around here for a million years about, maybe people early on would stay sober because it was their last bit of money they didn't want to lose, which I think is maybe that was a true thing in the 60s or 70s. I don't see it today. And so we tried to get the operators to switch to either raise your rates or add an admin fee, or if you're going to have a deposit, it has to say very specifically in your paperwork that the resident signs how they could lose their money. Before they ever give you any money, they know how they could lose it. And, that hopefully, or it did somewhat discourage some of the crappy operators from saying, you lose your money if I say you lose your money, which is basically what they were doing. They were really autonomous and really difficult with MASH people, not just me, trying to tell them how to run their houses. It didn't feel good. It created a lot of static for a lot of houses. And some of the houses or some of the operators quit the state affiliate because they didn't want to be told what to do. And they felt like they were. So it's been a big dilemma for us. And there are still a bunch of those operators out there that are kind of just doing whatever they want, because MASH unfunded doesn't really have the wherewithal to not police them, because I think the job of the affiliate is to give them so much stuff they need and that's helpful that they want to join and pay your fees, right? So we've been stuck in that place for a long time. Go ahead.
Chris, as a previous operator, we never collected, I never collected sobriety fee or deposit or anything from the beginning, but I know there's some operators that do that. Maybe $200, might be $350 or something like that. But operators several months ago shared that what they do is, like, if somebody returns to use in their home, obviously they can't remain there, but they can say, hey, I have your deposit. Would you like me to get you a hotel for a couple nights? Or, hey, would you like me to buy a bus ticket for you? So they use it for stuff like that.
It's a perfect idea of what the affiliate, the certifying body could say to an operator: this is a good idea to do with your money, but can you make them do it? Can you make that mandatory? And that's, to me, one of the biggest difficult questions.
Yeah, and I don't tell the operators what to do with it. It is important that they disclose, hey, I'm taking your money and this is how you could lose it. And I actually make recommendations, because sometimes sometimes a person's going to make a place their own, no matter I always recommend like a nice size bulletin board by every bed, right? So they can put their family photos, they're scheduled, and so they can make the space their own, because if you don't get so that they can do that in some way, you're going to come over and they're going to have all these holes in your wall, because they're going to make the space their own, whether you like it or not, right? So, so I said, you could use the deposit as, hey, there's no holes in your wall right now, right? It looks good. But for every hole that's in your wall, you're going to lose $50 of your deposit. You can let them know, that, hey, this isn't okay, but yeah, to disclose up front that this is what that sobriety deposit is for. Hey, if you give 2-week notice, for example, and the bedding is still intact and there's no damage to the home, give your sobriety deposit back, but you're right, they should disclose that. Not everybody does it here in Michigan.
It's a good idea. There are a lot of really good ideas about how to treat the residents. I feel like for a long time, our operators were more interested in catching their residents or making sure they're compliant than making sure that they're comfortable and they feel like you care that they're there. And in order to be a private pay operator, which is what I've been telling a lot of these operators that stayed in business after the giant IOPs bailed out, I said, well, you're going to have to do things that make your program seem good and has a good, and word of mouth, people talk about it and they think you're good at this and that you run good houses and it's cool to live there, right? Some of them are literally like, yeah, it's too much work, because they've never done it. Somebody relapses and the IOP sends them a person the same afternoon to take that room. So, which is over. But the discussion about these kinds of things, the way to apply rules or money stipulations or process of eviction or kicking somebody out, the process of doing a room search, the process of doing a house meeting and what's included in that, what's the expectations in a house meeting. With my consulting clients now that I work with, I spend more time with them on how to talk to people at the house meeting than just about anything else, because it all comes out of that, right? The tone, the personality, the expectation, your attitude as an operator or manager, the way that you speak to people. And I just got done with a new kid that moved into my program today. He's 25 and he's been to a bunch of treatments. And we went over a bunch of stuff. And at the end of the day, I said, his name was Clark. I said, Clark, I know that I gave you a lot of information, but if you can figure out a way to live in this house in a transparent way and people don't wonder what's going on with you all the time, you're going to make it. And I can't give you a list of how to behave like that, but I can tell you that you probably have never done it and it's going to be a struggle at first. And we're going to give you the room to figure that out, because the using world is clandestine, right? And crazy and chaotic. And you're forced into a silo of your own head in order to survive in that world. And then you get into recovery and everyone wants you to be an open book and wants you to be transparent and honest all the time. And it's like, holy shit, how do I do that? Right? I very, very poignantly remember going through that when I first got sober, and I was in a sober house in LA and it was crazy. Anyway, so what I think is interesting, what a helpful conversation for all of us that we could participate in together might be, how do you, in the process of certifying a house, as opposed to having everybody just tell me what they do that they think is really great in their house, which we want to hear about, but how do you go into somebody else's house and get a sense that that stuff is going on, that attitude, that approach, that, whatever you like your process that you came up with means that you have an attitude of, I'm looking to have a policy that feels okay to people, right? And there's a whole bunch of policies, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Like, I have always had outside managers that have 3, 4, 5 years of sobriety besides the live-in managers that go to the house, that talk to people. They're examples. They have their own AA momentum, and they take people or tell people where they go, and they're allowed to go to meetings with them. And they don't live in, and they're not in the middle of they're not in the drama of the house. They don't really participate in that. And I asked them to go to the house, not only for the house meeting, but maybe at a particular time, right? Like show up at 5 o'clock when everyone's getting home from work or IOP and they're getting ready to go to meetings or they're cooking dinner. And there's going to be most of the house home. And when you go there, so if you go there and your purpose is you walk in and the residents are like, oh, hey, Chris or Jeff or whatever the manager is. And what you do in that moment, everybody's watching. So if you march in there and urine test somebody or bark at somebody, that's what they're going to see. If you walk in there and say, "Hey man, how's it going? I heard you got a job. That's great. Hey, I heard your mom's coming into town. Awesome." And does anybody need a ride to a meeting? And none of it is like business or accountability or gotcha sort of stuff. It's all about just, "Hey man, how's everybody doing?" They will remember that. If you go to a house to do a room search because you're concerned about what somebody's got in their room, we do it when nobody's home. Nobody knows we searched anybody's room because it's disruptive and it feels crappy. If you go in there and tell everybody to come out of their rooms and come down to the living room and go search rooms, then you're a prison guard. And that's not what we're doing. If you go to urine test somebody and you shame them in front of everyone else, that's backwards. So a lot of those little things that I'm talking about how to get a personality and a unity and a momentum and a good feeling in the house, come through the way you apply your rules and the way that you attempt, or the way that your attitude towards things that you have. Sometimes it's not fun. Somebody's drunk and it's a mess and it's messy and awful, or somebody overdoses and it's messy and it's awful. But sometimes we are all implementing similar sort of structural things because we all have some common threads that we all do. Like, we have to ask people to leave, we have to do intakes, we have to do house meetings, we have to do certain things that I know that almost all of us are doing. If you do the house meeting, here's another example. In the house meeting, there's 10 guys in the room in my program, or maybe 11. And we go through, I don't know if I have one here with me. We go through in the house meeting with a book that I made up. That's spiral bound book. I make it at Kinko's, one of those things that flips over. And it has in there meetings, sponsorship, service work, chore, IOP, job, fees, whatever the accountability things that everyone has to do every week. And you can be like, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? And you can check off the things that they accomplished for the week, whatever's mandatory, whatever's required. But you can also look back at the week before and say, well, you know what? You said you only went to 2 meetings last week also. So there's some efficacy to that in terms of accountability. But then the important part is that we put that book down and then we say to each person in the house, now tell me about your week. Let's say this guy, JT, who's in my house, it's been there for 6 weeks. And I say, JT, tell me how it's going. You've been here 6 weeks. What do you think? What does it feel like? What's up with IOP? What's up with your sponsor? Like, just give me a synopsis of what's going on with you every 7 days, right? And he'll say, well, I got a sponsor. I've been going to these meetings. I don't like my boss, but I have a job, or whatever the story is. And then after he's finished, then I ask the rest of the guys, I say, is that what you guys see? Is that synopsis? Does that sound like what you guys have been observing of JT? And they will say, generally, they will say either, yeah, that sounds about right. He was talking about the job the other day and I went to a meeting with him. And yeah, it sounds about right. Or they might say, I don't know. He's never here. I have no idea what he's talking about. I never see him. Right. Or maybe even that's a whole bunch of bullshit. He doesn't go to meetings at all. And so you create a scenario in the house meeting where, yes, you have to tell the truth or you could get called on it. But you could also walk into that house meeting knowing I can tell the truth and I'm not going to get killed for it, which is a whole new attitude outside of the using world, right? You come into any situation and you're okay telling the truth, which never happens. When I was a heroin addict in Boulder and LA and New York, I would tell you I was on the other side of the street when I was on that side of the street, and it had no effect on anything, but I couldn't tell you anything that was true. So if you can create that attitude that it's not a shaming moment, it's a compliance moment. You gotta say what you did and didn't do. There's the business of the house meeting. And then there's I want to know how you feel. I want to know what it feels like to be here. I want to know if you're going to meetings with your roommates. I want your roommates to tell me what they've observed. And you're not going to get in trouble if you say something that your roommate, or the other guy in the house may not want you to say. Like, oh, I saw him come in past curfew the other day, or whatever it is. So there's room for being honest, and there's room for the rules to be applied, but mostly there's a sense that, okay, this is an hour of my week where I can do my part to contribute to this house, and I can tell the truth about what I'm doing, and I can tell the truth about what I've seen other people doing, and I'm not going to get beat up by him, and I'm not going to get kicked out for going to 2 meetings instead of 3. And we try to create that. We want them to go to 3 meetings, but I don't want them to lie. So years ago, we had a no dating rule, and that was impossible to police. And what it did was, especially the people in the house that had been there longer and had found relationships, they were lying to us. And we set them up to lie to us every week. So we eliminated it. And so I think really, if anything, where you can manipulate or where you have influence on the way the house feels is mostly in the house meeting, and then in sort of the other interactions that you might have with the residents. And I don't have managers who yell at my guys. I don't have managers who take things personally. They're human. They might get upset once in a while or annoyed, but everybody gets to be an asshole once in a while. It's human life, right? So, but as I say these things and I talk about ways to try to have that feeling, atmosphere, momentum, whatever vibe you want to call it in the house, more recently, I'm very interested, because you guys are part of an affiliate. How do we look for that in another person's house? So I would love to hear if anybody has any ideas about that. Here, I think some of the inspectors have been interviewing residents and asking them questions about how it feels to live here and stuff like that. I'm sure there's ways I haven't thought of, and I'm about to do a whole bunch of inspections this summer, and I want to be able to kind of try to find those things in each operator without going in there and making them feel like they're not doing something right, which is easy to do, because sober house operators are typically alcoholics, and you can get them fired up pretty easily. So anybody have anything that comes to mind there?
Chris, when I go do a site review, there's a lot of things you look for, but you can easily tell. I feel like I can easily tell when I walk into a home if there's that healthy culture already going on. Is it clean? Is it maintained? Or do I have a bunch of people sitting there watching Bugs Bunny and eating Fruit Loops in the middle of the day? Or is maybe there's one person there because everybody else is at work? If there's a resident there, I do involve them with a conversation. Take me through a day in the life of someone that lives in your home. What kind of structure is there? From what's the expectation? What time do they need to get up? What's expected with them throughout the day? And I'll ask the resident to sometimes, share that information with me, if they're there. I used to try to meet with it. And I did it a few times. I try to meet with the resident privately. Operator was not happy about that. The resident was nervous about meeting with me because they knew if they told me anything, the operator would know who told me, right? So I try to involve the resident while I'm there. Like, hey, let's say if there's a fire, where would you go? If you had to climb out this window here, is there a meeting location? And sometimes they're like, well, it's out back, and no, I think it's, so it lets the operator know that, oh, this is something I need to review with everybody, because obviously there's a misunderstanding. But I like to give the residents my business card, and I put one on the bulletin board sometimes while I'm there too. So that way, if there is a problem, the operator, the individual can actually hopefully feel free to call me on their own. And the operators are going to know that specific person is the one that contacted me. So it allows them to open up freely, without the operator knowing, that they're the ones that outed them or whatever. So that's how I like to do it. And you can kind of see how people are. And when you ask them, and I'll ask them questions right in front of the operator. Hey, what would you do if so-and-so came home under the influence? What's the rule? What do you do? Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Hey, do you know where the Narcan kit is? Do you know how to use it? different things, but a lot of times when the operator or the individual kind of shares how their day is, you kind of see if there's some kind of more family oriented system in place. Or
Has anybody done inspections of somebody else's house for MARR that's on this Zoom?
We all do.
Everyone here does? Or everyone on the board, so to speak?
Well, there's only 4 or 5 of us, and
Okay.
none of us operate any, so we just all
Gotcha.
very slowly can do
Yeah.
some officers, right?
Yeah.
well, that's how it started out. It was a peer review. So when my late husband Kevin and I ran homes, we reviewed people's homes, and then we had operators would come in and review our homes. But just because we kind of feel like it'd be a conflict of interest. I don't run homes anymore. I don't want to run homes anyway, but I don't want to run homes and then inspect them. Because I would feel, I'm assuming you'd have somebody else review your homes. You can't review your own homes. So otherwise it's Kelly's learning how to do site reviews. It's myself, Kelly, and we have a contractor that reviews homes.
Anybody else?
Questions for you, Chris. I think
Yeah, go ahead.
your first thing that you talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago was really good about how to spell things as not the SS Nazi people, but to try to be really narrow with the person. And so now what I'm saying is you're doing some things with that going forward here. One of them was on your written motels, the things that you're operating. Are those the kinds of things that you do on that date and then on another date? And then my other question was on the number of persons going forward. How many of those people are really going to be doing requirements going forward? So you can be able to ask them, here's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months going forward. Do you have anything like that where you're doing those kinds of things going forward?
I'm not really following your question.
That's probably me having a really bad side using wall hole. But it's like this, if you're on there on day one and you're saying, okay, I got 6 people and the 6 people have the following things going on, are you ever going to look at those people at a future time, a week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that, where you're going to say, okay, here's what the difference is on those persons?
Gauging progress, you mean?
Is that what that's called? See, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
All right. So the progress thing is problematic and murky, but one of the things that does work is we're big on it matters where your ass is more than where your head is in early recovery. So if I can get you to do these things and not just sit on the couch and think about yourself or think about your recovery, then I can get you to come back and tell me what's working, what you don't like. Is there anything you hate or you like? Let's tweak it. I just did this today with a new kid, and I said to him, you're going to go to outpatient. You're going to go to therapy. You're going to have a psychiatrist for your meds. You're not going to see him that often. And you're going to have a sponsor, and you're going to have meetings to go to, and you're going to have our house meeting. And I know that sounds like a lot, but it's not that many hours of your week. So don't be freaked out that we own your time. This isn't treatment. But scheduling and routine matters. And I said, I'm going to build a schedule with you, a routine. You have input. We're going to try this and we can tweak this and then do that. Maybe you don't even like your outpatient and we have to get a different one. But we're going to get to a point where there's a routine and then you've got to go do it. And you've got to do it for a while and then come back and tell me what's serving you and what's not. And then we have a conversation with the family in this particular program every week. And usually that conversation with mom and dad is he telling you the same things? Is he what he's telling you what's really going on here? And that is a big part of it. Some of the moms call every day. They want to know what color shirt he's wearing every day. And some don't, right? The point I'm going to make here is that the people who recognize progress in their kid are the parents. They know every idiosyncrasy about them. They can tell by the way they walk if things are different. We don't know them that well yet. So I'm looking for progress points from the kid. I'm looking for progress points. I'm looking for the parents to recognize that. And in both people's interest, I want the kid to be like, aren't you kind of glad that your mom is proud of this moment? Doesn't that feel good? And mom, can you just be mom and not the manager of the recovery and just tell them I like you and you're doing fine instead of trying to be everything, right? I always tell these moms, I'm like, how long are you going to keep your addict kid in the basement and bring him Jello every day and think he's going to get better? He's never going to happen. So the I had a mom call me one time, and I've told this story 100 times. This kid, I'll never forget. His name was Mike. He was a grumpy little bastard, and he was at softball, and he'd been with us maybe, I don't know, a month or so. And I take a lot of photos of my people and activities, and I always have. And I caught a picture of Mike with a big grin on his face, and I put it on the Facebook page because I get them to sign something. They don't have to be on it. And it was amongst a whole lot of pictures. But I got a call from his mom who said, I haven't seen my kid smile like that in 2 years. And I went right over to Mike and I said, do you want to know what your mom said about this picture? Do you recognize how much that matters to her? Because you need to hear this. And I'm not a therapist and I'm not a family. I'm not going to get in between mom and kid about anything, but I wanted him to see that or hear that because who knows, I think it affected him. I think he heard it. I think he internalized it. I had another girl, and we used to take everyone to softball and to activities. We couldn't make them play, but we could make them go. And so we would have this line of people who sat in the chairs outside, and they watched softball, but they refused to participate for whatever ridiculous reasons they had. And this girl was as negative all the time, wouldn't do anything, always always mad about something. And I caught a picture of her with a big smile on, and I put it on the Facebook thing. And I went to her later and I said, "Did you see that picture of yourself on?" Because they can go on Facebook and see it. And she goes, "Oh, that picture's on the background of my dad's phone." And I was like, "Okay, when, right?" I mean, I get this is a bit of a Hallmark story, but it's true. And I've used that story with other parents, right? And expectations of parents. And progress is a big one. They're looking for progress every other day, right? A lot of times. And sometimes for the parents, progress means getting out of recovery residence and going back to school. And I'm more like, hey, the progress is incremental and it's tiny and it's messy, but it's happening here and now. So yes, we don't track data in that sense or, outcomes. I think, I can do polls and I have done some of my residents and see how they're doing out there, but progress is a big deal if you use it for a good reason. I forgot the other half of your question. What was the other half of your question?
I'm pretty sure that was the entire
Okay.
part of my section, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah.
Samantha has a question.
I didn't have a question. It was just kind of my insight into what works kind of when I get people in so I can keep myself on track with what their individual like recovery plan, right? So I have them sit down and there's like a list of like 15 we call them life domains. So I have them pick out just three, right? So three. That's, besides all the other things, like what's important to you from where you're at right now, and then we pick a date like that we want to do that. So like if it's relationships and like social stuff, because they're like a hermit or they used to be, sorry, somebody's calling me, of course. If they used to be like really into church and stuff, they can pick religion or stuff like that and work up to going to church on Sundays, and we can focus. So I'm like, okay, well, you said that you really care about employment, but you haven't been applying, you don't have any applications put in or interviews set up. Like, what can we do to work on that? Because you said that that's an important space that you want to be in for your recovery. And like leisure, like if you're just going to work and then doing meetings, like, well, where's that? They're like, well, I wanted to go to the gym. And I'm like, and they're like, but my schedule doesn't permit that. And my curfew is this. And I'm like, we can always adjust that for you to have those areas that are going to make you successful with your recovery. I'm like, all we got to do is talk about it, you know? So she started going to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know? And that's amazing, right? Because, and that it took us 6 months to get there, you know, because they're so
Yeah.
reluctant, you know, but I want them to get their, you know, their life routine down because, you know, they had to get the job, they had to finish their IOP, they had to report, you know, with their therapist and find the right mat and stuff that's working for them and the right meetings and find their sponsor that they enjoy, getting that courage, you know, because I usually say 30 days to get that sponsor. And they're like, oh, well, and I'm like, I get it. It took me 9 months to pick one and I still have her years later, you know, so I get it. But at the same time, it's just like I'm not, if that individual is really nervous about it and they keep using it as an excuse, I'm like, well, then you know, you're braver than that. I believe you're braver than that. Look at all these things you do. You can do this one thing. I was like, please don't make me be mandatory about this. And they're like, please don't do that to me. I'm like, well, then it's time to be brave, you know?
I
So I like to encourage them based on what they chose. Like I gave you the list, you chose the domains, you put the date on it.
yeah.
We're a month after the date you said you're going to start doing walks. Like if you say you're going to start doing walks because you love nature and it is now November and you said that October was your date and you ain't got no steps in, then it's time to start doing that or start doing something along that lines, like even starting a chat with the walking people, like, hey, I
Right.
want to walk alone. Well, there's communities that just get up in the morning and walk together. Like there's always a resource. So I think
That's good stuff. I think that
individual treatment plan.
what there are operators who would never have time to do that, right? That's not the level of care they're providing. In my Plus program, which is called Sober Living Plus, basically was designed because I ran traditional sober living forever, and it was 3 meetings, sponsor, service work, chair, do a chore, and there was not a lot of coaching going. We didn't even call it sober coaching then. It was this, 2001 to 2010. And that was the expected level of care. Largely, people were expected to be able to survive at that level of care because they'd had enough clinical work and they were there. Now, my program, I built around where people couldn't do that, where people failed in early sobriety and sober living, and most of those people are younger. They failed on time management and money and medications and appointments and administrating their lives. And so their recovery was interfered with because they couldn't really manage their time. And so I want to acknowledge that there are programs where they're funded or their staff or you have enough funding, whatever the price is to, whatever the fees are, you have the staff to get that far into helping and get involved with somebody's daily recovery, which is great. I'm much more involved with these residents than I ever was. And I wanted to be more involved, but I had 105 beds and I couldn't keep up. So the that's another dilemma that I think we should be talking about, which is, let's say you're a provider of a really, affordable model and you have a lot of people, but you don't have a ton of staff and you can't give them that one-on-one attention. But that model's needed also because it's affordable, right? I ended up having, until 2 years ago, I had 100 and some beds, and I started to have these traditional level sober houses fill up with younger and younger and younger fentanyl addicts. And I used to feel like I was pretty comfortable with my alcoholics and my crackheads and some of my, dope heads or whatever you want to call them, even though I worried about them. When I started to get filled up with these younger fentanyl addicts, I started to really worry about them. And I started to feel like I don't want a bunch of under 25-year-old fentanyl addicts in a house with no oversight. I don't want to do that model anymore. So I sold all of those, and I have what I have left have way more oversight. It's more expensive, but more oversight. So all of the different models that we could all run, you guys might be running something similar, or you might be running something that's much lower level of care or even higher level of care. Maybe there's, I don't know, level 3.5 or 4, and there's clinicians involved. But the through line of all of it is the standards and the approach. And some of you guys have probably been to the NAR conference, and I do the breakout group about a lot of this stuff. And I'm fascinated by sometimes every one of those conferences, somebody stands up and tells me a story about the way they implement certain things in their house. And I'm like, I've been doing this 25 years and I never thought of that. So that's invaluable that we share that, because people come up with stuff all the time. I've learned from operators here that I don't really even like. So does anybody else have anything to add? Or anything, can ask a question or whatever you want.
I have a question. I'm Stacia Collins here. I'm the
Hi,
new kid on
Stacey.
the block.
Cool.
And so my primary goal is always consumer first. And when I go in the homes, what I've done was I put a suggestion box in each of the homes because it's a lock box. And I told the consumers, whenever you feel like you need your voice heard, I want you to write down what your thoughts are and put it in that box without your name, because I don't want them to feel like they're going to get quote unquote in trouble or get reprimanded because they feel like something isn't right in the home. I'm not in the homes every day, but what I've done was I've taken the site review sheet, and I go in there as if I was literally auditing the home from a third party perspective or from a MARR perspective, and it actually works. But my question is, when we have consumers that are not engaging, what are some suggestions you all can offer to re-engage them, especially those that are in early recovery? My peers, they do a good job, but I just feel like our return to use rate is a little high right now. And so when we look at that, it's like, okay, what can we do better to help them? Yeah.
I think engagement is the banner word, right? And within the house, it's unity. I want unity in the house, and I want engagement in the sober community, because if you took a poll of people that were 2 or 3 years sober and they were getting their medallions for 2 or 3 years, they've been around, they've gotten some of the payback from getting sober, but they're not 20 years in and over it, so to speak. Like, I'm 27 years sober and I'm just a grumpy old timer now. But what I'm getting at is, if you took those people, the 2-year, 3-year area, it doesn't matter the age, and you put them all in a room and said, tell me the thing that mattered the most. They don't say their outpatient counselor or their Librium or their Celexa or their shrink. They say my people, my girls, my dudes, my guys, my friends, my crew, my tribe. Everybody says that. Nobody is like, I did this by myself. I live in a tent in the woods. Nobody says that. You hear it. You hear what people say when they're acknowledging that there's progress, and it's engagement. It's engagement when they figured out a way to engage in the sober community. And engagement could mean, oh, okay, I participate. I'm a coffee maker at the meeting, or I'm in on some level, right?
Okay.
One of the things I think is really important about people who struggle to engage, if it's difficult for you to make friends, period, as a person, recovery is slower, period. It just is. But here's one thing I will say to my people. I want to see engagement from you. And I'm not going to make you do things that I think looks like engagement. But if I can get you to go to the same meetings, pick 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and never miss it, what's going to happen is the people at that meeting that you see consistently are going to become safer to you. And you're going to be more likely to talk to them. They're also going to see you as more as safer, and they might talk to you. And that is natural engagement. And it'll happen if you just show up. People are
Yeah.
going to remember your name and they're going to be like, "Hey, what's up?" I remember when it happened to me and I was just like, "Why do they know? I didn't ask for this." It was invasive. It was weird. And I was 30 years old when I got sober. So I still couldn't tie my shoes at that point. But engagement is it's not ubiquitous. It's not the same for everybody. It's different,
Yeah.
right? And you got to find a way for people to buy in, you know?
Okay.
Luckily, like I was saying, I have the program where I have the capacity to be that deeply connected in questions, and we're in their lives quite a bit. But there are ways to do it. There are a lot of ways to do it. I don't know them all, but I got all kinds of tricks, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to have any one
Yeah.
of you email me or call me if you got a question. Hopefully, I can help with anything. But engagement is where it's at. I just think you have to have engagement be defined for each person on what it is, because there's little bits of engagement, and then there's the most popular AA person who's at every meeting, and there's trusted servant everywhere, and they're all
Yes, of course.
yeah. Then those guys are kind of annoying anyway. But
Yeah.
anybody else?
But thank you for that.
Yeah, of
Yeah, I
course.
do have
Yeah.
your contact information. Yeah.
And as we know too, not everybody that comes to the door is there for the right reason, unfortunately,
Yeah.
right? But as an operator, having the structure and expectation in place and holding people accountable to a schedule. I like person-centered plan, where you're kind of allowing them to, maybe they're going to go to school part-time and maybe they'll work part-time or whatever. I mean, it's person-centered. You're going to go to a SMART meeting versus an AA meeting. But you can't allow everyone to just sit around and watch TV all day.
Exactly.
And just because they don't want to do it, well, they know what's expected. No, you don't allow stuff like that in your home.
Yeah.
There's got to be structure and expectations.
We have my younger guys in this program, they can have their gaming console and that we set them up with a desk, and the rooms in this house actually have a hardwired internet. We give them everything they need, but we don't let them do it all of the time. It's a trade-off. I'm going to let you have it, but you can't live in there. And so that's an expectation. And it's not enumerated. It's not like a number of hours. I just tell them, we have this one guy, Tommy, who's the struggle. And I say, "Tommy, when you're in there too long. You spend the whole weekend in your room on your computer and you don't talk to anybody. Too much. So I'm not threatening to take your computer away. I'm asking you to get out of the room. And if it's really, really uncomfortable for you to get out of your room and go sit in the living room and there's two of your roommates down there, then we're not doing something right, because there's no reason for you to be intimidated by those guys. But some people are really scared to engage with strangers. They really are. And I see it more and more with the younger crowd, because their whole social life is in here. And
Yes.
yeah, I don't want to go down that road, but I really think it's important for all of us as operators to share ideas, because if you do some of these things and you focus on what it feels like to live there, and you do just little things to make it feel like it's a decent place, I'm respected, I feel like it's a cool place for me to be, you get something for that. Your beds stay full longer. People stay longer in my program. And the longer they stay, the more those like 5 guys I have that are almost a year in, that's a much more calm, centered group of guys who are not freaking out all the time, because their routines they got it down.
Yeah.
They may not have like devoted themselves to the 12 steps, but their lives are functioning. Their parents are off their back. They have money in their pockets. They have friends. They have a routine. It doesn't necessarily look, and I always tell them, I'm like, your life doesn't have to look like it's in recovery. It just should look like it's like you're not drunk in a ditch with no pants on. That's an improvement, right?
Yeah.
So I want people to stay longer because I have a healthier house.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be a new kid who comes in, and they're generally going to follow what they see. Right? Okay.
Okay, that's very helpful. Structure, routine, consistency.
Yeah.
Got it.
Anybody
Thank
else? Do we have to stop at 3, Catherine? I don't know what the story is here.
Well, it's 4:00 here.
Yeah, 3 for me.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah, go
It's
ahead,
kind of
Jim.
piggybacking off of what you were saying about being in the rooms or with the phones. Do any of your homes have do you allow TVs in their bedrooms?
No, there's TV. There's two TV areas in the house, almost always more than one. And no, you can't have a TV in your room. Now that mattered a lot more 10 years ago. My 19-year-olds don't watch TV. They watch their phone.
Right, they have their phones, yeah.
They will use the TV, but they're getting at the same content. It's just
Right.
it's just a device. And they don't even know they have no idea what NBC is or they have no clue what any of that is. But I don't, I think there are 19-year-old addicts in my program who have scared the living shit out of their families with their behavior and the overdoses and the hospital visits or whatever the craziness of the using years. Some of them, their whole using career is 15 months long, and they've scared everyone to death in their life. I used for 10 years every day, shooting up heroin in Boulder, New York, and LA all the time, as often as I possibly could. And I wasted an entire decade. And then I came to Minnesota and met some guys who would beat me to it, and I followed them around for a couple of years until the light came on, so to speak. But I find it pretty fascinating with these young guys. I have conversations with parents who say, we're not paying for anything not recovery related. We're sick of trying school and cars and car insurance and blah phones and then I end up trying to convince them to pay for the gym or to pay for guitar lessons or to pay for something that they don't see as recovery related because I have a happier kid. And now I can get him to do some of the other stuff because he's not so miserable. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to that too, but I want to circle back. I think it's important, for when Jeff and I are on the board meetings, we talk the MARR board talks an awful lot about, funding models and big picture stuff. And I'm always sort of needling them and about what about this part? What about the residents of the programs that, of the state affiliates and then the operators and then the actual residents? And how do we teach operators to do this right and well? And because you get you want outcomes? I have guys, that have stayed with me for 3 years and their lives are radically different. But all I do is think about this 24/7. I'm somewhat of an anomaly, but once again, if we're going to hang up soon, you guys absolutely feel free to contact me, and I'm gonna ask you guys what you're doing too, because I don't know everything. I'm gonna put
I put his name and email in the chat.
Oh, you put it in there. Okay.
We appreciate your time, Chris, and showing up today. Next month we actually have the lessons learned, which it's not a mandatory meeting for the operators, but it is recorded, and we would love if you could attend the lessons learned. Kayla can send you. I think it's at 1:00 on a Thursday.
Just send me an email. I'll show up.
So it'd be like a noon your time, but we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you, everybody, for participating today and showing up. And I hope everything's going well. We'll see you next month.
If any of you guys are wondering, that's a picture of me in jail in Boulder for 7 charges of without a dog at large with no leash.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Thanks, Chris.
See you guys.
Take care.
Hey guys.